Hey everybody, it's your girl Planet Ty on deck. I hope you guys are having a great day, afternoon, and or evening whenever you guys are seeing this. So thank you guys so much for tuning in with me. You guys already know I appreciate that, right? Okay, so I know in my last few true crimes, I have been digging into different centuries, figuring out and finding out all kind of information about what they had going on. What's tea, sis? Okay, and it has been really a good time for me. And so this one is nothing short of the same. However, I have found out about a woman by the name of Miss Hannah Mary Tabbs. You guys, she was around kicking up dust in the 1800s. If you guys want to know the information that I discovered about Miss Tabbs, all you guys got to do, stay tuned. Okay, so thank you guys so much for being back on deck. Without further ado, let's jump into this story time. So, Hannah was born in Maryland in the 1850s. 10 years after the Civil War, she moved north to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1874, in Maryland, she lived with her husband, who was said to be 15 years older than her. Now, that's a huge age gap. You guys light up the comments if you guys have ever dated someone significantly older than you, or would you? I'd like to know about it. And in my past, I've dated somebody who was pretty much, who had more than 10 years on me as well. But 15 years is, it's up there. But you guys light up the comments and let me know your thoughts on that. So Hannah, she lived with her husband, okay, the guy was 15 years older than her, and she also lived with her mulatto niece, a kid by the name of Annie Richardson. Although it was speculated at that time that her niece was actually her daughter. It was also speculated that Hannah must have been raped by one of her owners, which was the initial reason that she moved around a lot and used different aliases. Now, it was said that she used so many different aliases at different times that it was really no telling who she really was. People couldn't really just say for a fact if it was her, because she'd be walking down the street one day, her name was Hannah, the next day she answered to Annabelle, and so people who who knew her or thought they knew her, they would be looking real sus, like, yeah, sis name was just Hannah yesterday, but she's answering to Annabelle today. Well, maybe it's her middle name, who knows? But anyways, let's finish with this story time. So Hannah was legally born Hannah Ann Smith in the 1950s, and she was born into slavery. So going back to what I just said a few minutes ago about it was speculated that she may have been raped by one of her owners. Yeah, one of her owners, meaning that she was literally born into slavery, so she was a slave during her time. But she managed to escape slavery, okay? And she headed northward and settled in Philadelphia, where she and her accomplice, an 18-year-old guy by the name of George Wilson, were accused of murder. Now, they were accused of murder after the discovery of a headless, limbless, mutilated torso. Now, I was unable to find any information that was just specifically directly only about George, okay, or how he and Hannah met, like what was the circumstances, because George was 18, but although Hannah, she, I didn't really get her age, because there was so many reports that said that, one minute she was Hannah, the next minute she was Annabelle, one minute she was this, next minute she was that. So they really don't know her true date of birth. When I say they, I mean public records from back then. They were not able to really truly pinpoint her true date of birth or anything else like that. So yeah, it was just really hard getting all the information. But yeah, so I really don't know, if her and George met at a friend's house, if they met at a barn, who knows, but they were said to be pretty close, and some would even say that George was Hannah's right hand. So prior to the discovery of that torso, Hannah she didn't have a criminal record, okay? So until then, anything that she done, it flew under the radar. It was as if she didn't do it because she got away with it, okay? And so she didn't have a criminal record until she and Wilson were accused of murder. Now, this was due to her consistent use of aliases and giving false information to people kind of everywhere she went. She was kind of like a, how do you say, a female, just a person who would, at wherever, well, they're like not necessarily a Rolling Stone in the bedroom per se, but just like they get around, right? They get around and people know of them, but nobody really knows them. You guys light up the comments if y'all know what I mean, okay? So reports suggest that Hannah would often give fake birthdays, names, ages, and addresses wherever she went. So very few people actually knew her true identity or where she was from. Some speculate that Hannah was running away from a past that was too much to bear, which is why she always changed her identity and who she was, so she wouldn't have to face whatever consequences, that happened as a result of whatever she done behind her, right? So what was very interesting about Hannah when I was looking into her case is that she had a really bad reputation of violence and fraud, but only within the Black community. Right? Now, I told you guys that Hannah was a slave. She ran away and she escaped and everything else like that. Big kudos to her. Looks like good looking out, sis. You did all of that, right? Okay. But then as I dug a little further, I realized that, they said she had a bad reputation of violence and fraud within the Black community. Now, in the 1800s, violence and fraud within the Black community, it wasn't reported, especially if it was Black on Black crime. It wasn't reported like that because who was you going to report it to? Well, the slave masters who was beating the hell out of everybody, or who exactly? So everybody could catch a whipping. You guys know what I'm talking about. So it wasn't really reported like that. It's like if somebody was more powerful for you or more dominant than you, and they were able to overcome you in some way, then you know what? If you took an L, you took that L. You know what I mean? Or if you had an opportunity to get them back, you would get them back. But it was no such thing like, really, I'm going to go tell law enforcement, aka massa. It's like, who was going to do that? You know what I mean? So she was able to go under the radar for quite some time with very, very vicious, violent acts. Okay? It was said that she consistently assaulted people and often threatened her own family members. Okay? So she was like, I don't know, she was like a thug. She was thugged out. I don't know. It's just that she was completely, she was violent. She was aggressive. She was, she was alpha. She was dominant, but she was bad with hers, okay? The reports, none of them suggest that it was just so great. It was just like there was a lot of hostility, but I do think that it's what's based on the fact that of what she experienced herself coming up. You guys ever hear the saying, kind of like, when someone say, do as I say, not as I do, but everything that they done to you was all bad. You know what I mean? So it feels like with Hannah and her circumstance, she was doing a lot of the mirroring effect, okay? She did suffer violence at the hands of others. She suffered violence. I don't know if it was within her own family as well, but definitely, anybody who was a slave suffered violence, but at the hands of her slave masters and other people who she knew probably and or trusted or cared about, which was why it was more her finding a way to declare her own independence in some kind of sort, like, I have the power now, you know what I mean? Before I was powerless, now I have the power. Before I couldn't talk, but now I speak type mentality that she kind of held with, which was the reason why some of these brutal assaults that she committed actually happened, I suspect. Okay, so they said not only did she assault her family members, she also assaulted her husband oftentimes, okay? In 1887, it was reported that Hannah became involved in an adulterous affair with a 24-year-old man named Wakefield Gaines. That's Wakefield Gaines. Now, this guy, he was of mixed race, and he was from Philadelphia, 24-year-old young man, right? Now, the thing about it is, although I don't have Hannah's exact age, I believe Hannah was much older than 24 when she met him. It doesn't matter, cat food, dog food, it's all food. You can date anybody you want today, okay, as long as they're legal. But so anyway, so she got herself a little young tenderoni, right? It was like, it started off all good, all cool, y'all know, blah, blah, flirty eyes, flirtation, probably lust, who knows? I'm just saying, y'all, right? So it was all good or whatever else. But now, Hannah, you knew you got your husband in the cuts, but I guess she was so violent about her. She was like, you know what? If her husband get in her business, she believe in putting sincerely these hands, okay? So I'm not a sister of domestic violence, but Hannah was, okay? So, yeah, so she went ahead with her affair with Wakefield Gaines, okay? They started having a good old-fashioned time, having some adult fun for a few ticks. Now, there was no information on how Hannah and Gaines met, or how long they knew each other, etc. Articles only acknowledged that the two met, and there was reports that they did have an affair. So Hannah allegedly threatened to kill Gaines after she found that he was talking to another girl in the neighborhood. right? Now, is this selfish to want your cake and eat it too? Okay, I asked this question. Y'all light up the comments if you're with me. I asked this question because Hannah, when you met Gaines, you were already married. You remember that guy who's 15 years older than you that you've been hanging out with, kicking it with, calling him your boo thing and everything else like that? Just saying. She was already married, okay? So just because you began this little dirty after dark adulterous affair over here with this handsome young steed, that doesn't mean you get to have them both, okay? So anyways, but somehow she felt differently, right? So when Hannah found out that he was talking to little mama down the street, she was like, oh, really? Oh, really? So she allegedly walked up on him or walked up to him and she threatened to kill him. Oh, you was talking to her? Really? Really? That's how you want to live life? That's what you're doing? That's how we doing it? So she, got all upset or whatever else and she threatened to kill him, right? Now, the crazy thing about it is 2 weeks later, after a person by the name Hannah saw Gaines talking to the neighborhood girl, 2 weeks later, Gaines came up missing. Okay, so a girl or a young adult by the name of Jenny Cannon Gaines, Gaines's sister, reported him missing after that. Okay, she hadn't seen her brother. He would usually pop up. They would usually see each other at the family house at some point, sometime. And guess what? 2 weeks later, he was never to be seen again. Okay, so Gaines' mutilated torso was discovered in Colonial William B. Mann's ice pond on February the 17th in 1887 in a place called Editon, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia police investigator Frank Geyer, James Tate, Thomas Crawford, and Pete Miller determined that Hannah, in conjunction with the 18-year-old George Wilson, murdered Wakefield Gaines. Now, you guys, this is so crazy, right? Because I have a lot of question marks about this here story, because for Hannah to even be suspected of being involved in the murder of Wakefield Gaines, simply because, he was talking to a neighborhood girl, even if he was intimate with the neighborhood girl, again, you don't have the right to kill somebody. Keep in mind, she was having an affair with him. Hannah was a married woman. So why in the world would she consider it her place to think that she should be able to have control over somebody else who she was simply having an affair with? I don't know. Y'all add in the comments and let me know your thoughts on that. So while Hannah was in custody, she confessed that, While Hannah was in custody, she confessed that on the morning of February the 16th, 1887, 18-year-old George Wilson came to her home at 1642 Richard Street. Gaines was already at her home that morning. So George, he comes over, but Gaines is already there. He's sitting up, he drinking a cup of joe, right? He drinking some coffee. He's up or whatever else. Now, y'all know how I usually go. If somebody's sitting at the table and they drinking their coffee, they either put their good work in the night before, or maybe he spent the night. I don't know. He could have just came over that morning, but it's the way it's written is suggesting that, Gaines had already spent the night there, okay? So if he's already there and me and him are chilling, my little boo thing, when my friend comes over, okay, that morning, you wouldn't think it would be a problem, right? He's sitting down, chilling, reading the paper. So Wilson and Gaines, they got into an argument, right? So none of the articles were stating exactly what the argument was about, just that these two guys, they got into the argument, and Gaines, he jumped up out of his chair and he hit Wilson. Now keep in mind, Gaines is Hannah's new lover, okay? Wilson is Hannah's 18-year-old male friend. So Gaines, he was reading the paper. Wilson comes over. They got into an argument, for whatever reason. And then Gaines got at his seat. And keep in mind, Gaines is the oldest. He's 24 and Wilson is 18. So Gaines get up and he decides to put a little bear claws on Wilson, right? Or so he thought he was about to do that, right? So the two fought and Wilson hit Gaines over the head with a chair. Gaines fell to the ground. And Wilson hit him several more times with the chair. And then he dragged Gaines' body to Hannah's cellar. Now, side note for me, one would wonder, while all this is going on, what is Hannah doing? Right? So Hannah, excuse me, your lover's over here fighting with your 18-year-old bestie, your friend. Your lover and your friend are fighting, Hannah. What are you doing? right? And then not only what are you doing, okay, even if your lover started it, he's the first one who swung or whatever else, right? Well, he's in distress. He's over there getting tapped up with a chair. I would think that, you know, a little sense would say, take the chair from Wilson, break it up. That's enough. That's enough. Somebody got to go. Wilson, get out of here. Get out of here. We'll talk later. You know what I mean? Something like that. I would assume something like that would happen, but it did not. It absolutely did not. Now, she actually allowed Wilson to drag Gaines' body down to the cellar, right? She didn't stop the fight at all. Now, I understand, like I said, that Gaines did throw the first punch, but you know they say when you roll with a person, whether they right or wrong, you still roll with that person. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But so I didn't understand her position there at all, right? So anyways, and then it also started making me question and think. Now, because no article or report tells me the connection that Hannah had with Wilson, I began to speculate myself. Could she have had an intimate relationship with Wilson as well? Because think about it. Who wouldn't want to stop even let's just say, hypothetically, their friend and their lover from fighting? They weren't just doing any fight at this point. They were fighting to the duel. Anytime somebody picks up a chair and busts somebody over the back or in the back of the head, they are now fighting to the duel, literally for their lives. So because she didn't try to stop it, it makes me question, did she not want to take a side in this? Because technically, on the low, she was with both of them. I don't know. Y'all light up the comments and let me know y'all thought on that. But that's a strong thought I have about this, right? So while in custody, Hannah confessed that Wilson removed Gaines' clothes, and after retrieving a butcher's cleaver, he dismembered Gaines, right? So y'all remember, they tussling, they fighting. Then Wilson gets that chair, he hits Gaines in the head, and then he continues to beat him with the chair until Gaines is dang near unconscious, right? And then he gets a butcher cleaver. Okay, he takes off Gaines' clothes. Again, Hannah, where are you? What were you doing? Why you were watching this? Were you not trying to say anything? Were you not trying to do anything at all? I don't know. Y'all light up the comments. Okay, so I'm not that hardcore. I couldn't see that. I couldn't see something like that happening to a lover of mine and not try to do something to stop it or to try to bring an end to it. I just couldn't, right? Y'all light up the comments and let me know if you think you could sit through something like that. So Hannah said she took Gaines' clothes. Hannah said after this that she took Gaines' clothes and his torso. Okay, keep in mind, the other guy, Wilson, he dismembered him. Okay, he took off the clothes and he started hacking on him. Now, Hannah said she took Gaines' clothes and his torso. Then she boarded a 6:30 p.m. train and she went to Edison, where she threw the body over into the water. Wilson also confessed to the crime, but stated that it was Hannah that dismembered Gaines. At this point, I don't know who it was that dismembered Gaines, because, you know, it was said that Hannah had a bad history of a lot of violence within the black community. So, I mean, and she was said to be really aggressive and hostile, so I really don't know who dismembered him. Whoever did it, I think it was ridiculous, and I'm sure that there was something else that could have been done. Now, he admitted that he threw Gaines's head and limbs in the river. Philadelphia police investigators, Frank Geyer and Tom Crawford, Tate, and Miller, accompanied by George, they searched the river but never recovered the dismembered body parts. So now when George is in custody or whatever else, the investigators are saying, take us where you threw his head at. Show us. So he goes and he takes them to the river and he's pointing down there or whatever else. And they had a search team looking all over. They never found the guy's head. They never found Gaines' head or anything else like that, right? It was also speculated that the only reason that the police were spending any time on this case at all is because they thought that Gaines was white. Now, keep in mind, you guys, the year, I mean, the century, okay, the 1800s, okay, then the year like about 1885 or something around that time that this was happening. Again, there was not police help for black people like that, okay? It just was not, okay? So it was a rarity. So the only reason, it was highly speculated that the only reason that they were even looking for Gaines's body and made this a whole thing and actually got some coverage in the paper was because they thought that Gaines was a white guy and Gaines, in fact, was a mulatto guy. Okay, so the Philadelphia District Attorney George S. Graham prosecuted the case against Hannah, Mary Tabbs, and George Wilson. The physician, Dr. Henry F. Foreman, he shocked a packed courtroom when he testified that Wakefield Gaines was alive when he was dismembered. Now, I can only imagine the Gaines family, how they felt hearing this while they were in the courthouse. They had to be mortified. I would be mortified hearing that when my family member, they had their limbs cut off them, they were still living. Because then to me, that spells torture, you know? So y'all let up the comments and let me know your guys' thoughts about that. And he had to be in a notable amount of pain, you know, perhaps screaming and bellowing, who knows? But then again, he was probably slightly unconscious still, feeling very weak, because remember, he was beat over the back of the back of the head with the chair for some time before the dismemberment began, right? So in this case, Hannah was convicted of accessory to murder by Judge Hare, and by Judge Hare, and she was sentenced to, guess what? Just but 2 years in prison for her part in this, right? Wilson, on the other hand, he was convicted and he was sentenced to 12 years in Eastern State Penitentiary. Now, I'm thinking two years and 12 years, if it's my family member, oh, that's not, it's just not enough. I mean, you know, different time, different day, and perhaps that was the longest that they would allow that to be, but it just didn't seem like it was justice enough, in my opinion. Now, a book was actually written about Hannah, and it's called Hannah Mary Taft and the Dismembered Torso. It says A Tale of Race, Sex, and Violence in America by the author is Kali Nicole Gross. If you guys want to check out her spin on this and the details, make sure to go ahead and do that. All right, you guys, that is all that I have for you guys today for this true crime story time, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you are new here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you guys so much for being on deck. Like I always say, there is always another story to be told, but for now,